All right, so tonight we are in our second session of Women of Tanakh. Tonight we're going to do Rivqa Imenu, and I will first of all just mention that the reason why the sheets are entirely in English is just because I feel terrible with all the paper, all the waste of paper. Not that it's a waste, but after the shiur, it just becomes piles of paper, and I feel terrible about all these paper. And when I put in the Hebrew, it doubles the size of the sheets, or even more, because a lot of times the Hebrew fonts are bigger. So I just omitted them because I felt like, I have this feeling that I'm being a poor citizen and harming the environment or something. So I just put English, but I think that'll be okay for our purposes, because first of all, we know these stories. And second of all, because I can supply the Hebrew when we need it, okay? And you can always go look up the Hebrew. But our discussions are in English anyway. So even if I read the Hebrew, I'd translate it into English. So I figured this would be okay. If you'd prefer Hebrew, let me know. I'll provide it. I just felt like my conscience was leaning on the side of... I actually put the Hebrew in and then took it out, because I saw that it became to 7 pages. And I was like, oh, that's so much paper. Anyway, so Rivqa Imenu. We talked about Sarah Imenu last week, and Rivqa Imenu is more of we see, I think, more of a personality in Rivqa Imenu even than we see in Sarah Imenu in certain ways. We do see certain things about Sarah Imenu, but like Avraham Avinu, Sarah is more of a hidden character. You don't see her full personality. You see, they're almost like towering figures, Avraham and Sarah. They're like larger than life characters, and they're hard to fully grasp, what they're about and who they are. Whereas Rivqa Imenu is a little more accessible to us. She's a little bit more complicated of a personality. She's a little bit more human of a personality, in the sense that she's someone I think we can relate to because of the complexity. We're all complex people. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. We have our problems. We've got our baggage from our childhood years. We've got whatever we've been through in life. And she's more like that than somebody like Avram or Sarah, who seem to have cut ties with whatever their past are, and they're totally, larger than life. So Rivqa is, of course, introduced to us in what story? Who knows what story Rivqa is introduced to us? The story of Eliezer going to find a wife for Yitzchak, right? And we first find her going to the well, and Eliezer, of course, asks her for some water. And we all know the story, that she offers not only water for him, but not only water for him, but also water for the camels. And then she brings water to all of the camels. And then he realizes this must be the right woman, because that was his whole plan. The plan was, whatever woman is going to be willing to do that must be a perfect wife for Yitzchak. And of course, it turns out to be Rivqa. So you can see that he gives her, first of all, gifts, right? He gives her a nose ring, which whenever parents come to me and say, my daughter wants to wear a nose ring, is it wrong? Is it against the Torah? Is it against halakha? I said, well, it's in the Torah that they wore that, so it can't be that bad. So he gives her a nose ring, and weighing half a shekel, and 2 gold bracelets weighing 10 shkalim. And Rashi brings the midrash that the half shekel is supposed to represent the half shekel that the Jews gave in the Midbar. When they counted people, they didn't count by head, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They counted by half shkalim, right? Machatzita shekel. We still have the custom, machatzita shekel. Before Purim, people give machatzita shekel. Machatzita shekel was how they counted people. And what are the 2 bracelets of 10 shkalim in weight? These 2 bracelets represent the Aseret HaDibrot. They were on those 2 tablets. And they contained 5 mitzvot, or 5 dibrot, 5 statements on each one of the 2 tablets. So that's what's represented by the 2 bracelets that she got. They were the number 10 divided by 2 reminds us of the Aseret HaDibrot. So one of the questions, actually, we talked about it in one of the midrash classes. So if you have listened to any of those, or you've been acquainted with any of those, you might have heard we discussed actually this particular midrash, but I'm going to go further in the discussion of it today. I just wanted to point out this midrash that Rashi brings, that he's connecting whatever gifts Eliezer is giving to Rivqa to the future of the Jewish people. Does Rivqa at that moment know what a machatzita shekel is? Does she know what Aseret HaDibrot, what the 10 Commandments are that are going to be given to Moshe hundreds of years later? Of course not. Not at that moment, she didn't know about that. And yet the Midrash is reading into, if you will, or is adding into the story an allusion, a hint, a reference to these future events. Okay? So we have to wonder why. In the next piece he asks, whose daughter are you? Please tell me. Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night? I would have wanted to hear the answer to the first question before going on to the second one, because she could say, my father's Charlie Manson, and he's a serial killer or something like that. Find out who he is first, and then ask if there's a place to stay overnight. But he asked both questions. He says, who is your father? And do you have a place to stay? And she answered him, I am the daughter of Betuel, and we have plenty of room, and plenty of straw. And then Eliezer says, wow, this is unbelievable. Not only did I find a wonderful woman, but she happens to be a member of Abraham's family, exactly like it was supposed to be, and just things are working out unbelievably. Right? He keeps thanking Hashem, thanking Hashem, thanking Hashem. Now Rashi points out something about what Rivqa says. What does Rashi say? She answered the first question first and the last question last. That's definitely true, right? He asked her, who's your father? And what was the answer? Betuel, right? And then he asked, do you have a place for me to stay? And she said, yes. So she answered the questions in the order that they were given, right? So big deal, so what? Anyway, first of all, I could know that just from reading it. Okay, I don't have to be told. Rashi doesn't have to say, oh, look, she answered the first question first and the last question last, because anybody who reads it could see that. So why does Rashi have to mention that? And what's the significance of it? What do you think? He doesn't think we're paying attention? Of course, Rashi presupposes that we're paying very careful attention, so he wouldn't have to tell us that. He's trying to point out something about her, right? And actually what it is I actually put on the sheet. I gave you the answer right there. It's from Pirkei Avot, your favorite study, Pirkei Avot. 5th parak of Pirkei Avot. One of the qualities of a wise person is he answers the first question first and last question last. And this is actually something that anybody who reads the Rashi's purpose is to remind you of that Mishnah in Pirkei Avot. He's not just describing what she did, because anybody could read that and see that she answered the first question first and last question last. By describing it in the language of Pirkei Avot, he's trying to tell you what about Rivqa? What's he trying to say? She was smart. Right? She's obviously smart. Because look, she answered the first question first and the last question last, and we all know from Pirkei Avot that that's an indication that she's a smart person. She's not just a scatterbrain. She's not a ditz. Okay? She's put together. She has an organized, attuned mind. Okay? Very nice. What happens next? Rivqa has a very unsavory brother who has the name Lavan, which is really, he's very interesting name for a person who is very very shahor. Yeah. Right. He's not really he's not the type of person that Lavan is like a white, pure, straightforward, clear. He's exactly the opposite. But his name is Lavan. And he hurries over, and what does it say? As soon as he sees the nose ring and the bracelets on his sister's arms, what is he thinking? The rich guy is coming. Let's make sure that the house is ready. And so he comes and says, come, blessed by the Lord. Why are you standing out here? I prepared the house for you. Come on over. What a nice, hachnasat orchim, Lavan is such a nice guy. The first time we meet Lavan, he seems like a tzaddik. What a nice person. He doesn't even know who this is, and he's already rushing him in. But the Torah actually tells you what it was he was interested in, right? What did he see? He sees jewelry. Right? He says this person, if they gave my sister golden bracelets and a nose ring just for giving them some water, oh my gosh, can you imagine how much money they must have? If that's what they give just for a small favor, we got to become friends with these people. And so of course he invites them in. And what I find fascinating is, what did Rashi tell us, or what did the Midrash tell us, that those bracelets and that nose ring represented before? the luchot, the Seret, the Ten Commandments, the machatzit shekel of the Jews in the desert. But I don't think Lavan is thinking about that. What does Rashi say Lavan is thinking about? Why did he run? Because when he saw the nose ring, he said, this person is rich. That's what Rashi says. So when Eliezer is giving the bracelets and the nose ring to Rivqa, Rashi is telling us that it's symbolizing some beautiful spiritual concept, right? About the Torah, about machatzit shekel, that every Jew, we're all connected. All those are beautiful ideas. What does Lavan see? Money. Dollar signs in his eyes, right? So that's what he sees. And he runs. And they have a... Yeah? Oh, can I repeat what I said?
Yeah.
That when Eliezer gives Rivqa the jewelry, so there we're supposed to be reminded of these spiritual concepts, the Ten Commandments, Aseret HaDibrot, Machatzit HaShekel, all these beautiful spiritual ideas. When Lavan sees it, all he sees is the material things. He just sees the riches of Abraham, or the riches of Yitzchak, potentially, that he could get his hands on. And we know the whole story, when Yaakov comes and stays with him, that he hugs all the kids, because he's checking to see if they took anything with them. Do they have any extra cash on them? Right? So Lavan is, that's what he's interested in. Now, and you'll notice that, when Eliezer comes and he speaks to Lavan, and he speaks to Betuel, he plays up the material wealth of Abraham. Because he realizes the kind of people he's dealing with. Oh, he brings out gold and silver and articles of jewelry, and he gives gifts to the brother and the mother. He wants to show them the material opulence of Avraham Avinu, because he realizes that's really what they're out for. That's really what's interesting them here. Okay, but what about Rivqa? What about Rivqa? He wants to go back right away. He wants to, right? Eliezer says the next morning, okay, thank you very much. We're taking Rivqa. What do you mean you're taking? Well, hold on. You can't just go off like that. We need time to prepare a wedding. We need to talk about it. We need to plan. Got to call the caterer, photographer, flowers, orchestra, band, whatever. You can't just walk off with our daughter like that. And what does he say? What's Eliezer's response to that? Does he leave empty-handed? What happens? Does he let her stay with Lavan and Betuel? No, of course he comes back. She comes back with him, right? But what do? They do something very interesting. They say, let's call her and ask her what she wants to do. Now, if you all are young ladies, imagine this happened to you. Some strange guy just showed up yesterday. You met him at a well. He gave you some gold. He came over to your house and had dinner with your parents and gave them some more gifts and some more gold. And then the next morning he says, I want to take her back to my place to marry my master. Goodbye. What are you going to say? Does that sound like a good deal? You don't know who this guy is. It's like a Beauty and the Beast situation. You don't know what's waiting for you on the other side, right? You don't know who it is. You don't know what it is. You don't know who this... Just because he has money doesn't mean anything. You've never met this person in your life. Before yesterday, you didn't know who this person was. You don't know who Yitzchak is. You don't know who Avraham is, except I'm sure they knew by word of mouth, but other than that, they didn't know. And you're just going to walk with this guy. You're going to leave with this guy. He just came 12 hours ago to your house for the first time. You just met him yesterday. So what do you think Lavan and Betuel hoped to accomplish by asking Rivqa? What? Yeah, exactly. They figure she's not going to go. They wanted to delay everything. They got some they got some gifts and everything. They're happy about that. They're willing to wait for the wedding and see what else maybe they can get in between, back and forth, have a few more negotiations, a few more visits, some more gifts, whatever. They think that this is an opportunity for them to stretch out the process as long as possible. And so what happens? They go and they ask her. What do they expect her to say? No way, I'm not going with this strange guy who just came yesterday. Let's wait a while. Let's see who he is. Let's see if he can really deliver. Let's see, let's get to know him better. Let's meet a few more times. But she doesn't say that. What does she say? I'll go. She agrees to go. Hops on the camel and heads back. And they blessed Rivqa and said, may you increase to thousands and thousands, and your offspring possess the cities of their enemies. And of course, when Rivqa comes, she sees this very majestic-looking person walking in the fields and says, who is that? And he says that it's like the only love at first sight, story. Actually, no, that's not true because Yaakov and Rachel also. But sees him, and she almost falls off the camel. She covers herself up, and it turns out to be Yitzchak. And of course, Yitzchak brings her in, as we read last week, and finally felt comforted about his mother's death because now he had a matriarch. There was a woman in the family again. And what's interesting is that Rashi says that when Rivqa said, "I will go," she meant, of my own accord, even if you don't want. Meaning when Rivqa said, "I'm going to go," she knew that they didn't want her to go. She knew that they were trying to put the responsibility on her to say no so they could keep her home. And yet she said, even if you don't want me to go, I'm going to go anyway. So she went with conviction, is what Rashi is trying to say. She went because she desired to go from some deeper part of her. Because obviously a normal person would be very anxious about this. An average person would be very worried about this. And she's willing to leave everything behind, that yesterday the life that she knew is going to be over. She's going to move on. That's a big deal, yes. Okay, well, it is hard. So the Midrash says that, and the reason that they say that, the reason that they say Rivqa is 3 years old, is based on the following. That and when you see what it's based on, maybe you can appreciate why it's debated. Okay, it's based on this: the Akedah. Okay, we know certain. The problem is we know when certain things happened in their lives, and we don't know other things. That's the problem. So sometimes we extrapolate or we take educated guesses. So what we know is, we know exactly how old Sarah Imenu was when she died. She was 127. We know how old she was when she had Yitzchak. She was 90, which means that at the time that Sarah Imenu died, Yitzchak was 37 years old. Right? Now, we also know that in the Torah, at the time of the Akedah, at the time that Avram brings Yitzchak to the Akedah, at that very time he was notified that Rivqa was born. Okay? Now in the Torah, the story of the Akedah, of the binding of Yitzchak, and the story of the death of Sarah are right next to each other. In other words, if you're reading through the Torah, you go right from the Akedah, the next story is Chaye Sarah, death of Sarah. So what if I assume, okay, well, they happened right after one another, right? The Akedah happened, and then right afterwards Sarah died. What does that mean? Oh, that must mean that Yitzchak was 37 when he went to the Akedah, because that's when his mother died. We know that, and we know that Rivqa was born right around the time of the Akedah, because as soon as they come back, they get word that Rivqa was born. In the end of Parashat Vayera, it says that Rivqa was born. He was informed that, hey, did you know that your family just had a new baby? That Nahor, your brother, just had a baby, Rivqa. So they're around the same time. So if you say that it's around the same time, Rivqa was just born, and Yitzchak is 37, right? And it says in Parashat Toledot that Yitzchak was 40 when he married Rivqa. Is 40 years old up? So then it all works out, because he was 37 when she was born, he was 40 when they got married, and that means she's 3. Okay? That's where they get that from. Do you understand what I mean? Now, it's not an ironclad argument. Why? Because sometimes events that are written right after one another in the Torah didn't happen immediately after. Sometimes Abraham is like in his 80s, and then the next thing he's in his 90s, and then he's over 100. And it happens in, one story after the other, many, many years elapse in between. So we could say, it's possible to say, that Yitzchak, because there are two things that are difficult to believe about that scenario. Right? One is that Yitzchak was 37 when he went to the Akedah, when it sounds like he's a little boy walking with his dad and saying, hey dad, where's the sheep? Where's the goat? It doesn't sound like an adult. And then Rivqa also sounds like a little bit older than 3. Right? So there are two difficult things to believe about it. If we don't assume that the Akedah and the death of Sarah happened at the same time, we don't have this problem anymore. Because we could say that the Akedah happened when Yitzchak was 5 or 6 years old, or 7 years old. And then 30 years later, his mother died. Okay, at the time of the Akedah also, let's say, Rivqa was born around that time. 30 years later is when Sarah Imenu died, and he met her. So then she's an adult. She's on the older side for someone to get married back then. Right? So that's a way that we can reconcile it without, we don't have to accept the 3-year-old view. I think that the simple reading of it, when you read it, it says that she's na'ara. It doesn't say she's a baby. A na'ara means a teenager usually, or a young woman. A young woman. So the simple reading is not that way, but I'm explaining to you where they get that from. They get that from a reading that puts those events at the same time. Okay? What I wanted to point out also is that Lavan, the way that Rashi presents Lavan is materialistic, but also aware that Avraham is a unique person. Why? Because he says, I cleaned out the house. And Rashi says, what does it mean I cleaned out the house? Me avodah zarah. I took all the idols out, because I know that you're a servant of Avraham, you're not going to want idols. Okay? And when he blesses her, he says, may the blessing said to Avraham be fulfilled through you, Rivqa. So obviously, Lavan is aware that there is some special mission of Avraham, some special beliefs of Avraham. He's monotheistic, he's unique, he's different, and Lavan recognizes that. He doesn't necessarily follow that, but he recognizes that, as materialistic as he is. And he realizes then, what is Rivqa really choosing between then? The Torah or Judaism or whatever Avraham represents, and whatever the household of Lavan represents, right? She's really making a choice. And that's why she's portrayed as really making, with a lot of conviction, a huge decision here. Right? That they expected her to waver in the decision or to pull back. No, she's going. Why is she so sure she should be going? Not because she knows who Yitzchak is or what he looks like or anything like that. Or that she has known them for very long. No, because she believes in what he has to say. In other words, she believes in the idea. And that's why when Rashi describes the bracelets and describes the nose ring, he says that it's referring to the Aseret HaDibrot, it's referring to the Machatzit HaShekel, meaning that Rivqa sees the spiritual side. She says, hey, I want out of this creepy Lavan household with all of this, materialism and all of this sneakiness and all of the subterfuge that goes on and all of the lying and cheating. I don't want any of this anymore. I want to go with Avraham. I want to go to that type of lifestyle. I want to escape. So when she leaves deliberately to join Avraham's household. Yitzchak obviously is the one who's going to be taking over, but she wants to join that movement. She doesn't want to be part of Lavan's household anymore. She's making a very deliberate judgment. And that's why Rashi uses the bracelets and the nose ring as the thing that's different. Because when Rivqa sees it, she sees the spiritual. When Lavan sees it, he sees the material. That says everything about them. When Lavan is presented with the opportunity to send Rivqa right away to Avraham, he says, no, I want to wait. Why does he want to wait? Because he thinks he's going to make more money along the way. More gifts, more meetings, more negotiations. What does Rivqa say? No, I want to go right away. I want out of here. I'm tired of the two-faced, lying of Lavan. I want to be part of a truth-seeking family. And so that's that's why it says Rivqa was smart, right? It says she answered the first question first, the last question last, because she was a wise person. She was somebody who really understood what Avraham was about, what Yitzchak was about, and she had a determination to follow in that path and not to stay with Lavan and Betuel. Okay, so from the beginning we see someone making a really, almost like the first convert in a way, right? Somebody making a conscious decision to leave one way of life and to join another. And that's what Rivqa is starting out with. But we see something else about Rivqa. So the first thing we see is a tremendous conviction in wanting to redeem herself from the bad family environment that she's in. But we see another thing about Rivqa, which is she's a more complex personality. She ends up with someone, they say opposites attract, right? But if there was ever a person more pure, more I don't want to say naive, it's the wrong word, because naive sounds like intellectually, stunted or something like that. I don't mean like that. But more pure, more innocent, okay? More sheltered is a good word than Yitzchak Avinu. There's nobody more sheltered than Yitzchak. He's never been out of Eretz Yisrael before. Right? He's never left his home. He's never left the land. He's never done anything independent. When he goes throughout Israel, what does he do? He redigs the wells that his father dug, and he names them the same names that his father named them. Right? He's somebody who really is just single-mindedly following the path of Abraham Avinu. He doesn't have much interaction with others. He doesn't engage much with others. He doesn't leave the land of Israel. He's considered olat tmima. They said he's a pure sacrifice to God. Why? He went on the Akedah. He was totally devoted to Hashem. He's a pure product of Abraham and Sarah. And then in comes Rivqa. Rivqa is a product of a very different background. Right? She's coming from Lavan. She's coming from Betuel. She's coming from the other side of the tracks. Not the Yitzchak way of thinking, not the Abraham way of thinking. She wants that. She's attracted to that. She wants to be a part of it. But she's coming from such a different world. And so you see, with that in mind, it says that in Toledot, the next parasha, that both Rivka and Yitzchak are praying for a child. And Hashem answers the tefillah of Yitzchak, and his wife Rivka becomes pregnant. And she becomes pregnant not with one child, but with twins, right? Just twins. Now this is interesting because it's the first time we find twins, right? We have, really in the Torah as part of this lineage. Now, at first you might say, well, that's just, genetically, they obviously had twins in the family or something like that. But think about this. Twins who are jostling around in her belly, right? And the Midrash says that, when she would go by a holy place, Yaakov wanted to come out. And when she'd go by a bad place, Esav wanted to come out. But what does that say to you? When you have two diametrically opposed personalities coming from Rivka, in a way, it's almost representative of the two diametrically opposed personalities of the parents, isn't it? In a way. And who did Rivka like more, so to speak? Who did she love? Sure. The one that she wasn't used to. Right? Yaakov. She grew up with the other kind of, the other kind of person. So when she sees that, she says, I'm used to that. That's like my family. I don't want someone like my side of the family. And then what does Yitzchak see? Yitzchak sees Esav. Yitzchak says, this is exactly what I need. Finally, somebody like this who can go out in the world and engage and conquer and do all. I can't do that. This guy's going to be the leader. This guy's going to be able to be the father of the Jewish people. Not me, not somebody like me. I'm just an ivory tower academic. I sit in Eretz Yisrael and I'm very pure and I'm very holy. I can't go out there and make things happen in the world. Look what Esav is able to do. Wow, I'm so impressed. So they're impressed with the opposite, right? They live vicariously through their children. Sometimes we say that, right? They see some great talent or strength and exactly what they don't have, and that's what they love in the child, right? Sometimes people love in the child what they see of themselves in the child, and sometimes they love what they can't have, what they don't have. Like stage moms or something like that, where they get obsessed over, oh, my daughter, she's so talented, and she's so wonderful, and she's so beautiful, and she's so amazing, and the mother doesn't have any of those qualities, so she's just living through the daughter. So that is what Yitzchak and Rivka are having here. It's a very interesting thing. So you have, it's almost like the genes of Yitzchak were deposited in one half of the pregnancy, and the genes of Rivka are in the other half, and you have two totally different personalities emerging from one womb. So Rivka is more represented in Esav, so to speak, and doesn't like him. Yitzchak is more represented in Yaakov, and he's not his favorite. Okay, I wouldn't say he doesn't like him, but he's not his favorite. Now, they both loved both of their children, obviously, because you see that even Rivka said, I don't want to lose you, I don't want you guys to kill each other, so she cared about both of them. It's not like she didn't love them, but she thought that Yaakov was the one who was the future of Am Yisrael, and she was right. Now, it says some very interesting stuff. Like, it says that Yitzchak and Rivka, when they prayed, they stood in opposite corners of the house. And it says that when she had the painful pregnancy, Vatelech lidroshet Hashem, she went to inquire of the Lord. She went to inquire of Hashem. And what does it say she went to inquire? What do you mean go to inquire? Your husband is a prophet. Why don't you ask him? Hey, Yitzchak, why do you think I'm having this bad pregnancy? She doesn't ask him. She goes, it says she went to the academy of Shem ve'ever. She went to Shem, who was a Navi alive at the time, and asked him. And he told her. Why can't she just go to her own husband who's a Navi? Why does she have to go so far? And what does he tell her? What's the prophecy about Yaakov and Esav? 2 nations are going to come out. Right? V'rav ya'avod tza'ir. The older one is going to serve the younger one. So what does Rivqa know from the beginning? Does she know which one is going to end up being the good one, so to speak? Good one. It's going to be Yaakov. V'rav ya'avod tza'ir. The older one is going to serve the younger one. So if that's the case, why doesn't Yitzchak know that? Did they ever talk? They ever had a conversation? By the way, honey, I went and talked to a Navi today, and he told me that the young one is going to be the dominant one. They never had a discussion about this in all these years? Apparently not. Apparently they didn't communicate too much. At least not about these issues. And so what happens? Esav becomes a deceiving type of guy, right? Kitzayid befiv. He was a hunter, which means he knows how to manipulate. How do you hunt? You hunt by waiting for somebody to show their vulnerability and taking advantage of it, right? You hunt by manipulating the creature, getting him to walk into your trap, right? Or getting him at a moment where he's not paying attention and shooting him with an arrow or whatever you have to do. And so in the same way it says that Esav also manipulated his father, right? He would come and say, oh yeah, I'm very religious. I have a halachic question. I have this halachic question. I have that halachic question. And really he was just making it up because he wanted to look very religious, but it wasn't true, according to the Midrash, right? Whereas Yaakov was Ishtam, he was very simple. He was more like his father. Very simple. Not trying to show off, not trying to get involved, doing his own thing. And finally comes the day that Yitzchak decides he's going to bless his son. And which son is he going to give the beracha to? Esav. And Rivqa finds out about this and says, oh, wait a second, this is not good. This is not good. Not only do I love Yaakov more, it's not purely subjective. I know he's going to be the one. I heard from Hashem, he's going to be the one. He's going to be the chosen one. I can't let this happen. So she summons over Yaakov and gives him the whole ruse to play. I'm going to put goat skin on your arms. I'm going to make the food for you. You go in. Where did Rivqa learn such crafty manipulation?
Family.
It's her family tradition. Right? It's her minhag. Right? This is her custom. This is what they do in her family. Her family tradition is to do this kind of thing. Lavan is a manipulator, we know. When Yaakov goes to stay with Lavan and he thinks that he's marrying one daughter and he ends up with another one from the switcheroo, right? He thought he was getting Rachel, he ends up getting Leah. In fact, the Midrash even says that when Yaakov came and he wanted to marry Rachel, the minute he met her, he fell in love with her. He said, I want to marry you. And what did Rachel say? Wait a second, you don't want to marry me because my father is a trickster, a manipulator, a liar. He's going to fool you. He's going to take advantage of you. And you know what Yaakov said? Don't worry. I know how to do that stuff too. I'll be able to go toe-to-toe with him. Of course he doesn't. Well, he tries. It doesn't work out. He tries. But the idea is, in that family, this kind of behind-the-scenes manipulation of things. So this is what she does all the time. So she's finally taking this art form that she learned at home, and she's using it, putting it to good use, making sure that Yaakov gets the beracha. After Yaakov gets the beracha, when Esav gets very upset, Yitzchak says to Esav, Ba'achicha b'mirma. Your brother came with cunning, and he took your beracha. What does cunning mean? It says, b'chokhmah, with wisdom. He used wisdom. He used crafty type of wisdom, a manipulating type of wisdom, but he ended up getting what he wanted. And where did he learn it from? He learned it from mom. And where does mom send Yaakov? Where does Rivqa decide to send Yaakov? What a nice mother. You know? I couldn't think of a better... She ran out of that place. She didn't wait 24 hours when she was given the opportunity to run out of her uncle's house, out of her brother's house, right? But she sends her own son right back into the lion's den. Isn't that interesting? Why do you think she did that?
To teach him wisdom?
He has to go for his internship. He's going with an internship with his uncle. He needs to learn how to be a little more savvy. In other words, Rivqa realizes that yes, many of the skills that Esav has are what we need. We need somebody who knows how to manipulate a little bit. Not in an evil way, not in a dishonest way, but somebody who knows how to make things happen in the world. Somebody who knows how to engage with people, somebody who knows how to work with people, somebody who knows how to negotiate, somebody who knows how to take advantage of situations in a positive, constructive way. Yaakov is not the type of person. He sits back and he does his own thing. We need to get you out there. Even when he goes to his father, who cooks the dinner? His mom does. Who puts the clothes on him? His mom does. Okay? He's a typical Jewish boy, this Yaakov. And his mother says, this is not going to work. You need to go and learn how to be a little bit more like Lavan. Like I am. Because you need the best. You can't have just Esav or just Yaakov. You need a combination. So Yitzchak thought that Esav was the combination. He thought he had the spiritual and the practical. But he didn't really have the spiritual. It was just a facade. So what does Rivqa say? It's true. We need the spiritual and the practical. It has to be in Yaakov. Yaakov needs to develop it. I'm going to send him to the man who can teach him the ropes. And that is the same person that taught her own brother Lavan. And indeed, he does go through trial by fire to learn how to deal with the roughest situations in life, but under the tutelage of Lavan. There's a very interesting pasuk at the end of the parasha that describes Rivqa. It says, Yitzchak sent Yaakov on his way, and he went to Padan Aram, to Lavan, the son of Betuel, the brother of Rivqa, who was the mother of Yaakov and Esav. It's a weird pasuk, because Rashi himself says, I don't know what this teaches us. Rashi says that. He didn't have to say anything. We would have thought that he knew what it meant. But he says, no, I don't know what it teaches us, because why does it have to tell us she's the mother of Yaakov and Esav? Don't we know that already? But I think that based on this, we might be able to hazard a guess at why, even though Rashi didn't but he didn't give an answer. We can hazard a guess at why Rivqa is described this way. Because the idea is, Rivqa, what she had and tried to pass to her children, she got from her home, from Lavan. So she's described as Lavan is described as the brother of Rivqa, who is the mother of these two children. In other words, that's the connection she wants to pass on. She wants to be able to transmit to both of her children, not just to Esav, but now to Yaakov, what she had from her family. This ability to make things happen in the world, if you will. This political acumen, maybe you could call it, okay? Practical, political acumen for dealing with the world, for making it in the world. And so what we find in Rivqa is someone, and at the end, by the way, it says, how did she know that Esav wanted to kill Yaakov over the beracha? She had Ruach HaKodesh. She had divine inspiration. Now you remember in the beginning of the parasha, beginning of the story, it says she didn't have divine inspiration about her pregnancy. She had to go ask somebody else. But at the end, she has divine inspiration. So what happened? The fact that she took the skills that she had and she finally used them in the service of the true good. In other words, she's finally integrated the different sides of her personality, because she took that side which was the Lavan-esque side and she put it in the service of the spiritual goals that brought her to marry Yitzchak to begin with. So she finally reached a height where she could have Ruach HaKodesh. She finally reached a height where she was able to have divine inspiration at the end of her life, because she was able to achieve that integration in herself. And now she wanted to pass on the same to Yaakov. So she is instrumental, again, just like we saw last week, right? That we oftentimes downplay the role of Sarah Imenu. She was a second to Abraham. But we saw that really Sarah Imenu was everything. The whole reason why we have Yitzchak was because of Sarah, not because of Abraham. And in this week's study, we see that Rivqa, because she comes from where she comes from, and she brings a totally different perspective to the table, she's the one that makes sure that Yaakov goes through what he has to go through in order to be the next Ab of the next generation. So you see how fundamental the imahot were to making sure that the Jewish people continue. Because Yaakov never would have developed the skills and the strengths that he needed to have to be a leader, and he never would have met his wives and raised his family without Rivqa sending him on this unlikely journey back to where she came from. So it's fascinating. And yet you can also see why Rivqa and Yitzchak don't communicate. Even after the whole ruse with the berachot, Yitzchak never says, I can't believe what Yaakov did. He tricked me. What were you in on this? No. She comes and says, it would be terrible if Yaakov married one of the Canaanim. We should really send him back to my family to find a wife, just like you found me. She doesn't say to him, Esav wants to kill Yaakov. We'd better get him out of here really fast. She doesn't tell him the truth. She knows the truth about Esav, that he wants to kill Yaakov. That's why she wants him out of there, or that's one of the reasons. She can't tell her own husband. Why not? He's a smart guy. What's the problem? There's no communication, and he won't believe her. He won't believe her. He can't see Esav for who he is. He can't imagine that my son is going to be a murderer. My son is such a person that he's going to go kill his own brother. I don't believe it. That would never happen. Whereas Rivka says, no, I know what makes him tick. I really know Esav. I get him. And because I get him, I know what he's capable of. And therefore I got to get Yaakov out of here, and I got to get him to a place where he's going to flourish. But she can't explain any of that to Yitzchak because he's not going to understand it. He comes from a totally different place, a very idealistic place, where he sees Esav, he only sees the good. He only sees the positive in him. And he's not able to see the sides that need to be worked on. Yes?
I feel like all that is really from where he's from. Because he was really very social people, that's like what he looks for in people. And because Rivka was from people that deceive others, and she knows what deceiving is, she knows like where he comes from and who he is. So I feel like
Right, she's from a deceptive background, so she sees right through him.
Yeah.
She can see right through him. As opposed to Yitzchak, who takes everybody as they are and thinks everyone is as pure like I am. They're an open book like I am. So of course, Esav is exactly what he seems to be. Why would I assume otherwise?
I'm trying to understand. I've learned that it wasn't a lack of communication. It was that whenever Yaakov and Esau were, picking at her or whatever was going on, she had some sort of nigla or something, and she realized Yitzchak doesn't have like he's not talking, he's not saying that like, oh yeah, like I don't exactly remember what was nigla or what happened there, but because of that she didn't want to put her husband to shame, and that's when she went.
No, I never heard that before. Yeah, I'm not sure where that's from.
I don't remember exactly.
Okay.
Maybe I'll find it.
Yeah, if you find, yeah. Yeah, I had never heard that. It could be. Still, though, the fact throughout the rest of the story that they don't interact much is very interesting and telling. I mean, obviously they had a connection with one another from the beginning, that they loved each other, but they really had very different backgrounds and very different visions of what was going on. Very different perspectives on what was going on, which is so interesting.
So is that, and did you come to realize that Esau isn't exactly
That's one of the things we never know. Just like, do we ever know did Yaakov ever realize that the brothers actually sold Yosef into slavery, or did they just kind of like brush it under the rug? There's never like a moment where it's clear that he gets the whole story. We don't know. We don't know what the postscript is.
Wasn't there something like that happened all now? Or I remember like Esau walked in the room or something like that. I don't remember what sorry, I don't know like tiny parts that like something about how he like felt bad. Yeah, I remember opening or something. I don't
When he would come to see Yitzchak. But he didn't see it. But still he didn't understand. That's why, right. Well, I don't know of any time that they
Did it look negatively at all, or is it only like that?
I think that there is some Chazal where, because she says to him, because he says, my father is going to curse me instead of blessing me. And So, and she says, whatever the curse is, let it be upon me. And so, if I'm not mistaken, one of the interpretations for why Rivka's death is never mentioned in the Torah. And she never got her wish, it seems, to see Yaakov again, because when he comes back, it's never clear that he actually gets to see her again. That could be a negative take on what she did. On the other hand, for Yaakov, there definitely is a negative take in the Midrash. There definitely is, because he did it twice, because he originally took advantage of Esav when he was dying to get the firstborn chip, and then this. So there's the whole thing that he gets swindled and deceived and everything by Lavan in a way as a payback for what he did. But it also teaches him, how to live in the world, how to hold himself up, how not to be a victim, how to be able to stand up for himself. And so when he comes back to Esav, he's able to stand up for himself and not be overpowered by Esav or have to rely on trickery to confront Esav. He's able to stand up and really hold his own in the presence of Esav, which requires him, this is a whole other story, but what really requires him to actually respect Esav, which is the most difficult thing. Because most of the time smart people, I don't know, this is what I hear from smart people, look down on people who are not as smart. They think of, this person is expendable, I can manipulate them, they're stupid, they're not, they're elitist, they're elitist. So Yaakov seems to have looked down on Esav, when he was very hungry and thirsty, he took advantage of him and got the firstborn rights from him. He didn't look at him as a very respectable person. He looked at him as, he's a brute, I could take advantage of him and do whatever I need to do. Whereas when he comes back, he finally understands, what? Esav is really an accomplished guy. He built a nation, he really made a life for himself, he really established himself much more than Yaakov himself had done. So that genuine respect, that's why when he has the wrestling with the angel, it looks like Esav. It looks like the angel of Esav. So in the morning when he sees Esav, he says, when I see your face, it's like the face of God. Meaning it's the face of the angel that I saw last night when I was wrestling the angel. What is that idea? It means that Yaakov is saying to Esav, I now see you also have a place in Hashem's plan. It's not just me. I shouldn't have discounted you just because you're not the same as me. And so when he actually respected him and didn't look at him as somebody to manipulate, then they were able to have a meaningful interaction with mutual respect. And that's what that story is about. But in the meantime, he has to go through dealing with Lavan and all the ups and downs that comes along with that, that come along with that, and really build up his ability to stand up for himself and to assert himself. And that's why Rivqa wanted him to be there, because he wouldn't have learned that sitting in the tent watching the sheep back home. Thank you all for coming so late. I really appreciate it. And I hope you'll come next week. I know that we're all going to be tired from post Tisha B'Av recovery, but
guys, the boys wanted